are two things I'm going to be doing today. I had a lot to say last week, which I didn't really complete. If you recall, we both were here last week. We discussed not only Abraham and the Malachim, including the fact that according to Ibn Ezra, one of the three Malachim was actually Kadosh Baruch Hu himself, and how it came. And then I ended up by telling you, going through when he was discussing with God about the destruction of Sodom. And he went to 50, 40, and 30 when he went down. And even then, I showed how each of these things were actually weighing upon God's midot, his own characteristic, his own, whether it's justice. And the last time with 10, 10 was, he was basically, Avram was begging God, he said, justice, they're right, they don't belong, they don't deserve it. But 10, he said, you have rachamim, give rachamim. So that was what we saw. But what I did not do, and I'm not going to say the word failed to do, I didn't get around to doing. I used to ask one of my, earlier, I think the first year I was in, okay, make it comfortable. I used to say, I think it was in my first shoot, my first Stella, was in Cincinnati for a year. And I used to say to him, I used to tell the people, I remember I wrote it once, I said, we are selling a Tuitz. Tuitz, T-U-I-T. So people said, what's a Tuit? I said, I don't know, but every time I ask people to do things, I'll get around to it. So I'm looking for round Tuits because I never, so that's what it is. I didn't get around to it. So therefore, I didn't complete it. So what I want to do for the first few minutes is to finish up what we had done. I don't want to leave you hanging. I'm sure many of you couldn't sleep for a week figuring out what happened with Lot and what we're going. So that's what I'm going to do now. So therefore, I have a separate, this is for the next one, a separate, same one actually as I gave last week. And really, all you you need for what we didn't do last week is number 9. That's what deals with the story of Lot. So that will take just a few minutes, and then I will give out to you the Mareh Mekomot for the story that we're going to do today. Now I'll give you that introduction when we get to it. Okay? So no, you're on the wrong page now. We're going back to what we did last week, right?
I have
number
it's not
9.
the same page?
It's the same thing as last week. I don't know if this is what we did last week. We didn't get quite to number 9, which in the English is simply the back page. No, it's not there. That's
it's
this
not here.
week.
Oh, okay.
Over here. That's what we have to do. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So if you just look at that, the English one, you want the Hebrew one. So number 9. You want to just the English. It's over here. So number 9. Okay. And Shalom Aleichem. I started saying, you have from last week? No, okay, I'm starting about what we left off last week. I never touched upon the 3 Malachim as they come to Lot. So that's basically just this over here, the last thing. And then from there, we'll get to this week's, okay? So that's how I'm going to handle it this week, and I don't even think I'll be able to finish what I want to finish this week, and that's okay too. I think you were told that Emir Hashem, of course, next week will end up being in shul. But after that, in 2 weeks, when we have right before Yom Kippur, I will be coming, and I'll be taking in the time slot of Rabbi Tal. I'll be here at 10. Was it 10:30 or 10:20? I'm not sure. So I'll be there for that. It might be a little easier for people. Women especially who usually have to leave on the Thursdays maybe to do some Shabbos. So now it'll be earlier for them, and hopefully that will bring some more people, and also people will be more aware of that. But at any rate, whatever it is, it is. So again, I'm going to start with the story of the Malachim. There are 2 of them now who are going to Lot, because the third one, according to the Ibn Ezra, is, of course, God himself, who was having the conversation with Avram as to whether or not to destroy Sodom and Amorah and the other 2 cities. According to the most Meforshim, there was no need, because every Malach has one mission to fulfill. the one mission of telling Sarah about having a child, or according to another midrash, to cure or how do I say that? I don't want him to word cure really. Abraham from the surgery of the Brit Milah. Either way, that malach didn't have to come. The other two were coming to. So there we have two malachim. And as we see as I gave out here, you see the what happened there, and we're just going to review that, and we'll analyze that and see how it compares to what happened with Abraham and the Malachim. So we see what I gave here as the source. Two messengers arrived in Sodom in the evening as Lot was sitting at the gate of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to greet them, and bowing down low, with his face to the ground, he said, "Please, my lords, turn aside to your servant's house and spend the night, wash your feet, and then you may go on your way." But they said, "No, we're going to spend the night here in the square." When it says Barachov, which in modern Hebrew we say it's in the street. But Rachov, the word comes from the word Rachav, which means wide open. And indeed, often there were open areas in these towns. I hate calling them cities. We think of cities like New York. City was they had a number of families, and there was an open area where they would gather. And in fact, the Mishnah in Tanya, when it talks about what happens, they say you take it out to the Rachov, or in the Torah when it talks about the city, the Ir Hanidachah, it says you take everything out El Rechovah. Doesn't mean to a street; it means the open area. So, at any rate, they said we're going to stay in this open area here. I was staying outside. We're not going to come to your house. But he urged them strongly. And so therefore they turned his way and they entered his house. He prepared a feast for them and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. Before they even lay down, the town council and the militia of Sodom, both the insignificant people and the influential ones, the whole assembly, without exception, gathered around the house. Okay, that's the part I'm going to focus on. Okay? That's a nice story. Walt Disney will bring it up, I'm sure, in a movie soon. That's the story that we have in the Torah. But as I said, I want to take this and I want to compare it and perhaps contrast it to the events of the angels when they came to Abraham. So let's see. Abraham was sitting where? When the Malachim came. I don't remember where was he, who Yosef, right by the tent, right in the middle of the heat of the day. Well, similarly, to a degree, we find that Lot was sitting at the gate of the city as well. Now, getting back to a little of what we did last week. The Torah, when it says Hashara, especially in Devarim and Kitetse, we speak about when Hotziu et Hanara, take out them to El Sha'ar Ha'ir. It's not simply the gate, the outside gate of that. That's trying to. It was also a place of, court and judgment. They would do that court. So I said El Sha'ar. They went to the judges. So it's interesting here. Yes, he sat by the gate. Gate also means judge. So now you understand. Chazal say, and it's a midrash. Because he just had become a judge. Who says he was a judge? Chazal understood. That's Shar. Why even mention he was sitting at the gate of the ear? Who cares what he was sitting? But it would seem he sat there as a judge. So that's why we have the Midrash and the Rabbanan tell us that he just had become a judge. He was a judge. Whether yes or not, but at least you know the source as to why rabbis have said perhaps that meant that he was a judge. Okay, good. So at any rate, he was sitting. And why was he sitting? It means he was sitting in judgment. He was at the gate. He was sitting in judgment, right? Who also was asked to judge? Wasn't God asking Abraham to judge with him whether he should destroy Sodom or not? Remember, I was telling you that the three malachim, according to some, was because they were needing a beit din, a court, three. That's why they had three. At any rate, so it's similar to them. He's sitting at the court, like it's sitting at a tent. He was sitting perhaps as judgment, as somewhat Abraham was doing and deciding whether or not to destroy. Interesting. And Lot, like Abraham, greets the people, doesn't ignore them. He greets them when he sees them approaching. He invites them into his home, just like Abraham. We have basically a negative feeling about poor Lot. Wasn't such a bad guy. You know, he was very much have brought up in Abraham's home. Yeah, we all have a little discomfort, I would call it, when we think back. Yeah, but if he was brought up by Abraham, why didn't he hang around with him, right? We remember before this, Lot makes the decision that he's going to be, and God, when there was an argument between the shepherds of Lot and those of Abraham, right? Abraham says, let's part one from another. And he chooses to go to Sodom. And the Torah it's a rare thing. Uncommonly, the Torah at that moment says a simple verse, really it's a comment, which isn't part of the real whole story at that point. And it says, oh, by the way, va'anshei Sodom ra'im v'chata'im l'Hashem ma'od. It says one thing. And by the way, the populace there in Sodom were very, very iniquitous. A nice word, huh? They sinned a lot to God, against God. And they were immoral. It's a very simple word to use. And that's you're walking back. I get so many things to tell you. Understanding the Torah. The Torah, when the Torah says, I'm sorry, I'm walking around and I shouldn't. The Torah, when it wants to say something is immoral, especially in Bereshit, it uses the term of Yirei Elokim, God-fearing. I didn't want to go to this place at Abraham because it says Yitzchak, because I know it was not God-fearing, which meant it was immoral. Have that in Mitzrayim too. On the other hand, and here you have Ra'im v'chata'im l'Hashem ma'od. It doesn't mean they stuck out their tongues and went, na, God. It's not what they did, but were they immoral? There was a basic moral kind of Torah, no Torah. When we talk about Sheva Mitzvot and Noach, these are societal laws that were expected to everybody to do that. Thou shalt not kill should not be, I couldn't kill because the Torah says thou shalt not kill. It's because it's a moral law. I wouldn't do something like that. I shouldn't do something like that. I had a history professor who told the story that his son was learning in yeshiva. He was older already. It wasn't like he was an eighth grader. He was already post high school. And he wrote home letters. In those days, you didn't make phone calls from Israel. If you want to make phone calls to Israel, it's probably easier to fly home and then talk to them and come back. Phone calls in Israel in those days, very difficult. So they wrote, these wonderful light blue sheets where you write about this small and it's a fits all everything, right? So he writes one of the things. He said something had happened about someone had taken something. So he said, if I'm ever tempted to take something that's not mine, I don't think and say, oh my God said that I can't steal. Torah says I can't steal, so I don't steal. He said, I would never even think of it. Part of your moral fiber is such that you are just a person who would never do something like that. That's the basic morality that is expected of all mankind. God expects that. Don't murder, don't steal, These are the things that are basic things. And when it says "Ra'im v'chata'im l'Hashem ma'od," it's a very simple thing. In Israel, in English, I would translate, they were immoral. Simple as that. They were immoral. Okay. At any rate, he was, and Lot chose to live there. That's why I'm saying we're a little uncomfortable about it. So there he is, but he invites these people in. This is even even today. If you ever took that trip down towards the Dead Sea, and you pass always every tour guide, you pass by a Bedouin camp, and they schlep you in. You can ride on the camels, and they always invite you in. Yeah. I wasn't looking for a big steak when I got there, but they invite you in because that's part of their culture. They always will invite you as a guest in. Comes from Abraham. They always did that. In fact, there's a whole thing. They said if they give you bitter coffee, they might stab you in the back. It's a whole big thing. It is. But at any rate, that's true. Cultural thing. And there he is. He invites them in, just as Abraham, that you learned from Abraham. The angels never meant to go inside. They were going to sleep outside, right? That's what they said. They only wanted to go to Sodom and then get out of there. That's what they wanted to do. I'm not going to spend time explaining that. There's a story in Navi in Melachim, where God gives one angel, a Navi, a job to go into a wicked city. There was Beit El at the time. And he said, go in and then just give the message and get out of there. And the Navi was eventually put to death. Not put to death, but God saw that he died. He was actually eaten by a lion. Nice. Because he hung around there for a night. And God says, get out of there. What? There's such an immorality there. And that seems to be over here also. There's such immorality. God said, peh. You run there and just get out of there. So anyway, they did stay, however, initially. Something, by the way, they didn't have to do with Abraham, right? They never were in any way reluctant, to have a cup of coffee with Abraham. They did have a problem with Lot. So we might see, he's like, but they were also reluctant to Lot and about Sodom, obviously. So it's interesting to imagine that perhaps they stayed there to find out, what was Abraham arguing? Did he do it before? Was he still arguing with God at the time that they were with Lot? We don't know exactly what's going on time-wise. But didn't Abraham say, how about 50, how about 40, how about 30? God says, no. And maybe it was what happens here, as basically God finds out that indeed there are not even 10 good people in Sodom. That's how he knew. I mean, God knows it anyway, but yeah. That's a godly thing he does. So there weren't even 10 that would save the city. And like Abraham, Lot feeds his guests very nicely. He didn't rush around like his uncle Abraham did in getting Vayoratz Abraham, Vayimaher Abraham. He doesn't do that because there was no need to do so. There was no need, as far as he said. He didn't have his wife involved in it. That what the rabbis say. Well, his wife didn't do it because she wouldn't want to. It would seem that Lot couldn't even ask him to do such a thing. What are you bringing in? And Chazal pick up on it right away. Because the fact that she turned around and became a big salt shaker was another indication that she wasn't really great. But so he didn't do it as Abraham did because that's a big difference there. But like Abraham, he does prepare them a nice repast. He gives them, a mishteh. This doesn't mean a party, by the way. It means something to drink. It's the drink from the shtod. Umatzot afa. He also baked matzot. Chazal picked up as being it was on Pesach and so on and so forth, right? Very simple thing. We had guests. They weren't staying for a long time. They didn't want to stay at all. So he had to make it quickly. How do you make something quickly, like bread quickly? Matzah, which is very fast. Boom, 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 right? So he does that. And Vayochelu, and they ate. Very nice. But the crucial difference between the Hachnasat Orchim, the guests entering into the house of Abraham, as opposed to the house of Lot, was, of course, the story, TORAH Mishkab. Before they were able to go to sleep, the whole town gathers around, Mikaton v'ad gadol, elderly, the significant and not significant ones, and they demand to release the guests to them and give them go to them, which of course never happened in the story of Abraham. And this outlandish, really, the outlandish event established already two essential truths about what's happening here. They now had the response, the angels now had the response as to whether there are any righteous people in Sodom. That's why the Torah is very careful to say, Mikaton v'agadol, everybody was there, because there are. And there were no righteous people there. He proved it right here, right? And if everyone was involved in this horrific plan, it wasn't just we want to go out and have a cup of coffee with them, discuss politics. That wasn't why they wanted him to be thrown out. They wanted to obviously mistreat them. That's a nice way of putting it. Okay, but because of that, let's look at the opposite. Abraham, when he had to bring in the angels, there was no danger for him. Lot's act of Hachnasat Orchim was an act of Sakanat Nefashot. It was a dangerous thing for him to do. And nonetheless, knowing who these people are, Ra'im v'chata'im l'Hashem ma'od, he quickly puts them in. Probably that's why he told them, you can't stay outside. You better come in with me. And he's willing to really risk his life and that of the family, or those of the family, with the people in the family, in order to this Hachnasat Orchim. So look at it in those terms. You say, hey, this Lot guy ain't so terrible. That's a tremendous sacrifice to do. And that's what he does, okay? And later on with the story, which I don't have in the source, but I'm sure you saw in the movie, he even offers his daughters to these people pounding on the doors, because he said, just take them, but don't harm my guests. Now, you and I may not be too thrilled about that. Well, what a great guy. He's going to give his daughters to them. But it does show the significance or the importance of the idea of you have to save people, innocent people. That's what we learn from that. And in that way, his acts were really even greater than those of Abraham. Think about it. It's pretty remarkable. In the end, Abraham begs for, please, maybe 50 righteous, 40, 30, 20, 10. God said no. Abraham says, all right. And he went away. Had nothing to do. So the pleas of Abraham didn't really accomplish much, if anything, more than showing how wonderful Abraham was. Sure. But what happens because of Lot and what he did, right? In the end of the story, is everybody killed in Sodom? Well, not Lot, right? Lot is saved, but more than that, he also saves his daughters and his wife. They do escape. He would have had his sons-in-law too, but sons-in-law, you can't always trust them. They made trouble themselves, and they couldn't. But he could have. He could have. Had they believed Lot, they would have been saved too, right? But they didn't. And and this is the part that not everybody remembers, when he is exhausted from the schlepping up the hills in the middle of, it's a hot area over there, Stone, let's face it. He's schlepping along there, and he says, I'm exhausted, I can't go on. He says, God, please, I know you plan to destroy Sdom, Amorah, Admah, Tzroyim, and one more, Tzoar, yes, Mitzar, Tzoar. So he says, please, hello, Mitzar, please save that city of Mitzar. It's a little city of Mitzar, means little, but so I can go there. And he saves one of the 5 cities. Abraham couldn't. Lot did. So we can't make this as a simple story. He's the bad guy and Abraham is the good guy. He had some remarkable positive things. And what does God even say? God says, He said, you know what, Lot? I hear what you're saying, and I'm going to give in to what you said. He didn't say that to Abraham. He says it to Lot. So there you have it. 2 stories. One in Perek Yud Chet, one in Perek Yud Tet, one for Abraham, one for Lot, and one for Sarah, and one for, I think, all of Israel, in effect, and all the world. Why? Because of Gemilut Chasadim, the simple thing of kindness. That's why we're told in Tehillim, Perek Pei Tet, right in the beginning, I think it's Pasuk Bet or Gimel, Olam Chesed Yibana, that the world can be established and built through kindness. This is the perfect example what kindness can do. Okay? So I finished what I wanted to finish last week. Is that okay? Oh, good. Okay? Now we can start what we wanted to do this week. Now, and I told you I'll give you an introduction. There are good reasons for introductions, besides wasting time. The idea of an introduction here, I want to show you what it is. What part of what I mean when I say trailblazing through the text of Tanakh. One of, if not the most recognizable, most known story in Tanakh and in Bereshit is the story of Yosef and his brothers. Right? I mean, there were good cartoons about it, movies. It's very popular. Everybody likes the story. And of course, if you haven't seen the play, Joseph and his Technicolor coat is played every single year in New Jersey, in the big thing in New Jersey, every year, Hanukkah time, every single year. It does the end of December. It's unbelievable. Because of COVID and stuff, they didn't for a couple of years, and they're back to doing it again. It's that popular. Because everybody knows the story. But I want to show you the text. And if I have to tear down some of your assumptions, I don't care. I want to let you see another side to the story. I want you to see how we might understand it. And I want you to see, just as I did now in talking about Lot, that maybe the brothers, as much as they did terrible things, not quite as terrible as we would think it was and as we've been taught it was. Part of the problems that we have in learning these wonderful stories where you're in 4th grade. Oh boy, I know you steal from there all the time. I know that. That's right. The problem is, truthfully, did you bring that already? No, okay, good. No, here it is, here it is. What two? I'm saving it, you know that. So, whatever, you'll give it later on. Is learning precisely what does the text itself tell us. Now, I'm going to also give an introduction by telling you I'm not going to be finished today nor next week. I'm going to have about 3 different discussions. Let's say it's as I said often, that since I've gone to Israel, I've learned to forget much of my English. But that's okay, because I've also forgotten much of my Hebrew. So it works out very, very well. Presentation is the word I'm going to say. I'm going to give you about 3 presentations, one today, about the entire story of Yosef and his brothers. And I think hopefully you will learn from it, and I hope you're going to enjoy it. It's a fresh view of the well-known biblical story. And it is, when looked at very openly and very objectively, we have a serious problem. We have a serious problem because much of what we have taught traditionally, from what Chazal tell us and what we were learning when we were coloring the books in 3rd grade, is not quite what it says in the text, especially one verse that takes everything upside down. So when I have attempted to, I have a number of times presented this approach. It's not my approach, though I'd love to take credit for it. We have Rishonim also Meforshim. But because it undoes much of our traditional view of what it is, some people became very, very uncomfortable. And I tell them, don't be uncomfortable. I'm just giving you a presentation of what else and how else we can look at it. So don't be too uncomfortable, right? I want to begin by telling you, Shlomo HaMelech says in Mishlei, Rabot machshavot belev ish, v'yatzar Hashem hitakum. That man has many plans, but it's what God wants that eventually happens. In Yiddish they said, "Man tracht and Gott lacht." Man plans, God laughs. And we all have our own plans. I can go through a number of enemies around our neighborhood who had their plans. And God does what He's going to have to do, because Atzat Hashem Hidakom. Now that is an introduction to this entire story. That's the story of Tanakh, basically. Man makes his decisions, right? He carries out his own agenda, and in the end, somehow, it's what God always wanted to happen anyway. So it's an important thing, a concept in life. We say, where was God? That. God, another one of my many concepts. God does not have and does not usually wear, at least when I talk to him, a red cape and flies down and fixes everything up. That's not how the world works. God impacts history either by changing it or by not changing it and allowing it to be. That's what we call giving man the right to choose. If God took away that right, if every time you started walking and when you woke up in the morning and you tied your shoes, starting with your right shoe, when the halacha is that you have to put your shoes in your feet in your shoes, you have to tie your left shoe, and God sees that and it throws down a lightning bolt and fries you, nobody's going to be sinning. Whoever does won't be around. So that's what it is. So it doesn't work that way. The understandable frustration about terrible things, whether it's October 7th or whether it's the Holocaust. Where was God? The answer is, well, where was man? It wasn't God who did what happened to our people. Some other men who did that. So anyway, that's really the story of Yosef. Rashi says it right away. In the beginning of the story, where it says "Vayishlachehu me'emek Chevron," that Yaakov sends Yosef from Emek Chevron, from the valley of Chevron, and Rashi says, "Look, I've never been to Israel, but I know that Chevron is not in a valley. Chevron is one of the hills. It's called Har Chevron. We know that. So why did it say Emek Chevron?" So he quotes Chazal, and he said beautifully. He says, "Ela me'atzam amuka." It is from the deep Emek Amuka plan of God. Shel otot tzadik hakavor bechevron. That was really from the tzaddik who was buried in Hebron. Who was buried in Hebron? What tzaddik? Abraham, right? Why? The kayeh mashene'amar, in order that it will fulfill what was promised to him when it said that in Brit Be'Nepatim, it says that your descendants will be foreigners in another home. So the whole story of Yosef ends up at the end of Bereshit. How? What happens at the end of Bereshit? Where is all of Israel? In Mitzrayim. They're in Egypt. Did God send them to Egypt? No. That was all what happened. Yosef had this, he was sold, he told them come down, they all came down. But God let that happen. God wanted it to happen that way because he had to have them in Egypt because he had planned that. So anyway, that's the whole point here. And I want to show you that what effect happened is simple. Yaakov, it's a story of human beings and their decisions. A father, Yaakov, sends his younger son, Yosef, to go on a mission, right? To see how his friends, how his other children are tending the sheep. How is that? How are they doing, right? That's what it was. Why he did that? Who knows? I can ask a whole bunch of questions. Why are you sending there? I mean, you're sending Yosef? You know how Yosef is not liked. You're sending him by himself. There's many questions I can ask, but somehow he made that decision, didn't he? And in the end, that's what happens. That's what God wanted to happen. So, does that relieve the deeds, the negative deeds that were done by the brothers and by others? That rhymes. What was he? There was a Flip Wilson. He was a comedian who would say, "The devil made me do it. I'm not guilty. It was the devil that made me do it." So are we to say, well, if God had this plan to happen, what are you blaming them for? They sinned. No. Don't work that way, man. It was a decision you made. God didn't make you make it. God was happy you did, but that was your decision. So at any rate, that's what happened. Man has plans. They have an agenda. They think that's what they're doing. God says, no, you're just doing what I want you to do. In the first place, not that I told you, but it's going to happen that way. So that's what happened. And I'm going to uncover these deeds and what they were, and was it really terrible? So we're going to begin in the text. I'm going to see if I actually included it here. Let me see. Yeah. Unfortunately, I did. Okay. It is on source number 3. I had done number 2 already. In source number 3. In source number 3, we read the following. And this is, we'll do just the English, right? That Yosef went after his brothers, right? And he found them in Dotan. They saw him from afar, and before he even comes near, they conspired against him to kill him. They said one to another, "Here comes that dreamer. Let's slay him and cast him into one of these pits and say, a wild animal has devoured him. Then we'll see what he will become of his dreams." Reuven hears that and he says him, saying, "Let's not take his life." He said, "Don't shed blood. Cast him into this pit in the desert, but don't lay a hand on him." So that he could, that way, Reuben felt he could save him and return him to the father. Okay? That's what it is. So the first part already tells us, and even before this, that the brothers were very jealous and wanted to kill Yosef. But Reuven does not agree and convinces them not to do so. And he wants to throw him in a habor. But notice the Torah says in Hebrew, habor hazeh. You know what habor hazeh means? Specific. This. Very good. It's specific. This pit. There was a specific pit he was referring to. If we were reading it, and certainly if someone's reading it in the Torah on Shabbos, when most people are either looking at the English translations or the commentary and not really, you don't realize that. How many of you realize that he was not talking about any pit? There was a specific pit he wanted to put him in. That pit, right? And probably the one that was one that he knew he'd be able, it was close enough to get to it, and he'd be able to pull him out of the pit. That was his plan. That was Reuven's plan. Good guy, right? But what happens afterwards? We find that after that, and as by the way, source 3 continues. Go to the English over there also. And there we see. So, when Yosef reached his brothers, they stripped Yosef of his coat, the coat of many colors, and they took him and threw him into the pit, and the pit was empty. There was no water in it. When they then sat down to eat, and they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Gilead, by the way, is in the east, northeast, with their camels bearing spices, bringing them to Egypt, by the way. And Judah said to his brethren, "Look, what profit is it that we just slay our brother or have him die in the pit, by the way, and having to conceal his blood? Let's just sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hand against him. He's our brother, after all." And the brothers agreed. Pretty straightforward what's going, right? That's, that we all know what happens there. That's what happens. It's exactly what the text tells us. And then comes what I would say is the most crucial part of this story and why I'm going to attack it. Immediately following that, in the 28th verse, that's after the 27th, which we just read, then Midianite merchants passed by, and they drew Yosef out of the pit, and they sold Yosef to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver, and brought Yosef into Egypt. So before I go on, who took Yosef out of the pit? The Midianites. And who sold him to the Ishmaelites?
It seems the Midianites.
The Midianites. And who brought Yosef to Egypt?
The Ishmaelites.
Very good. You got it all right. That's not what you learn when you're in 4th grade. But the brothers sold Yosef. The Torah doesn't say that. The Hebrew seems very clear. The Hebrew says, where is it? Okay, here it is. Vayaru anashim midyanim socharim, exactly as it's explained. And they pulled him out of the word achim, the word of the brothers, is not even mentioned here. That whole pasuk doesn't have the name of the brothers at all.
Huh?
Exactly. They were having pizza. They were having a lunch. That's exactly right. I can't tell you how important this is because it really saves so many questions we have. We'll get to that, although I don't know if we'll get it to today, but that's okay because this is going to be a lot of fun. Okay, so now you're beginning to see where the text teaches us something that maybe we would not have the thought. So it's helpful when you read the text because it's going to tell us something. That's what it says, right? So, Kaftet, when Reuven returned to the pit, Joseph was not in the pit. So he tore his clothes. He returned to the brothers. He said, the child is gone. Whither shall I go? Oh, going whither. We don't use that enough, I don't think. Whither. So anyway, here, you must say, but, it's a Queen's English, that's right. Whither shall I go? What am I going to do? Basically, oy vey. See, unfortunately, he didn't know Yiddish. Oy vey, what am I going to do? What is he going to do? Why? And why was he going back to the pit? Huh?
Pull him out.
To pull him out, right? That's exactly what his plan was. Why did he want to then pull him out? I'm curious. Why? Well, the brothers agreed they wouldn't kill him, didn't they? No, the brothers agreed not to kill him. No, not to kill Yosef. What did they say they would do instead of killing Yosef? No, after that. Look at what we learned before. Before it says, what profit is it? Let us sell him to the Ishmaelites. We'll sell him to the Ishmaelim. At that moment, I'm sure Rabbi was saying, hey, Vay, I was going to pull him out when they're not around, but if they're going to sell him, I won't be able to run. I better run there to get them. The Ishmaelim were on the caravan. They were moving down. I will tell you later on, even geographically. The Ishmaelites are coming from Gilad. You see right in the map. They come down to Gilad, and they're going back close to the shore. It was called Via Maris. It is the route of the sea. Maris is sea. Because that's where, in the ancient world, there was no ways, unfortunately. Or fortunately, that way they didn't get lost. And that was an international route. That's where international merchants went, because they were going down to where? Where were they going to? Egypt, of course. They had to get some, probably hummus and whatever. But they had to go down to Egypt where they had things. Remember, Egypt was the power. It was the empire at the time. So they're going down to trade. They were traders with a D, not T-O. They were traders coming from the northeast down to the southwest. And they had to go through this little place called Eretz Israel, though not yet called that. It's Eretz Canaan. And they're going by the brothers were in Dotan. Dotan was near Shechem, and it's up on a hill. And they see from afar that there's a caravan. Now, they're not going to come there in 5 minutes. They're going to take a while for them to get there. So they said, okay, when they get close to us, we'll be able to take Yosef and sell him. Reuven says, Ochenvei, because if they're going to sell him, what am I going to do? I have to save him. So he runs back. Okay? Why doesn't he find him? The Midianites had taken him out of the pit.
Yeah,
Did Reuven know about that?
did any of them know that?
Ah, good. Did Reuven know about it? No, of course not. So how do you think that they all knew about it, but Reuven didn't? But he was chewing on his pizza and it's too loud, he couldn't hear what they were saying. They didn't know. Nobody knew what happened to Yosef. They were planning to take him out and to sell him. That was their plan. See? They think they're going to do that. It wasn't God's agenda. The fact that they wanted to was bad enough. But that was their agenda. So when I say that, and I'm getting ahead of myself, it's okay, I'll leave you with a happy note. What does that mean? They didn't know. Reuven didn't know. Reuven comes back and says, God, what am I going to do? Now tell me, if we assume, as we, and the coloring books tell us this, that they knew, of course, why don't they tell Reuven, Ruby, what are you worried about? We sold him. It's okay, don't worry. They don't respond to him. They don't say, Reuven, we sold him. They don't say anything.
Maybe they felt themselves putter because the Midianites.
But Reuven says, where's the kid? If he's part of the brothers, well, they say, let's not tell him. What? They would have told him he's been sold. They don't respond to that. Why? Because they didn't know. They had no idea either what happened. Which means, and I might repeat that next 2 weeks, hopefully you'll forget by then and I'll be able to say it again. But what happened is simple, it's clear. Because they didn't know, so when they go and they tell their father, TORAH, Yosef, they weren't lying to their father.
Are you saying that they didn't see the Midianites selling Yosef to
Great question.
Egyptians?
Great question, because they helped me, but I forgot to mention. What's the difference? Why Midianites and Ishmaelites? Ishmaelites were international traders going from there to there. Midianites were the local people. They hear somebody screaming, yelling from a pit. Go in, they say, great, we got a slave. So they come and pick them out, and they go to the Ishmaelites. They're it's one of the most painful verses in all of Tanakh. They throw their brother into a pit. He might die, he might get killed. They're going to sell him, who cares? And they sat down and had a sandwich. They sat down to eat. Like it didn't care. They didn't care about it. It's a painful part. This is very important. That's why I said we're not going to give them Shlishi on Yom Kippur. But I'm just telling you what we felt. What happens to them is not exactly what we were taught. And that's a very important thing, and I'm going to go through that. Please understand that. But that explains many, many things, which I'll tell you next time, because it's 1:20 and Bart.
It says, then the Midianites merchants passed by, and they didn't Joseph.
Who's they?
That's who's they. And they.
What's the noun before this pronoun?
The Midianites.
Thank you very much. You just answered the question.
And they sold to the.
Yes.
And
The Midianites took him to. Like anybody who's speaking English. The same thing. They took the boy out of the pit and they sold him to the Midianites. Why am I going to say, who's they? Obviously who they is.
There's no one before the they except the Midianites.
Now, admittedly, because I'm ignoring the Chazal, how do Chazal understand this? Chazal say, yeah, but in 2 psukim before it says the Achim, and that's where it refers to. It's a little kvetched if you ask me.
What? Is that how they explain that they sold him for shoes?
That has to do with something else, because that's based upon the Navi where it says in the Amos, Mechwan ba'kesef tzadik ve'evion ba'avor na'alayim, which is not referring to them, it's referring to the sins of that time, but Chazal see it as referring to them. That's why they say na'alayim. But as far as we know, it was just kesef. It was, yeah. That's all. And it wasn't then who got the money.